Primary 6. Today we are going to be learning for grammar about how to use semicolons and colons. So we've done a little bit of work on these before, but we've not put it all together just yet. So on the board we've got one here and one here. So I want you to pause me and decide which one is a semicolon and which one is a full colon. Okay, so if you said that this one is a semicolon, you would be correct. And if this one is a full colon, you are correct. So just a normal colon. A helpful way to remember this is semi means part, and we know that comma just means a small pause. So if we look at the part, the kind of pause, we've got the comma at the bottom of this one, whereas the colon is different, so it is the full stop at the bottom. So we're going to look at using a semicolon first. A semicolon contains a comma and a full stop. It's helpful to remember this because it represents a much longer pause than a comma would, but it's still only a pause in a sentence as opposed to a full stop. Okay, so semicolons are used to link sentences that are closely related. So if we want to check if a semicolon is appropriate, we need to look at our sentences. Now, you would use a semicolon where you've got two sentences that would work absolutely fine on their own with a full stop in between them. But the reason we would use a semicolon rather than a full stop is because the sentences have got something quite close to do with each other. So let's look at the example. We've got the wood was silent and absolutely still. Little Red Riding Hood realised that she had not truly seen its beauty until now. So those sentences would work absolutely fine by themselves, but Little Red Riding Hood is talking about the woods in both of those sentences. So it's a fine thing to do is to join them kind of together with a semicolon. Notice that after the semicolon here we do have a capital, but that is only because it is Little Red Riding Hood's name. Normally you don't need to put a capital because it doesn't mean a whole new sentence. It's just a much longer pause than a comma. So a semicolon works perfectly here because it allows a transition between the sentences. The full stop might take away the impact of Little Red Riding Hood's observation and create too big of a stop and not point out that these two sentences are related. Here are some more examples of where we can use semicolons. So we've got Grandad is going bald, his hair gets thinner each time we see him. So obviously his hair getting thinner has everything to do with Grandad getting bald, so you can pop that semicolon in there as well. We had too many fumbles, we lost the game. Okay, so why did they lose the game? Because they had too many fumbles, so those two things join together really well. Sean wanted to call our new puppy Scritch. I hated the name. So both of those things are talking about the new puppy's name, so they go together pretty well. And then finally we've got, I am so sorry, will you ever be able to forgive me? Now those are obviously really closely related. The reason that they're saying sorry is because they've obviously done something they're asking to be forgiven for. As you can see in the sentences, using a semicolon works really, really well to allow the smooth transition between the two. So now we're going to look at using a colon. So a colon looks like two full stops, one above the other. A helpful thing to remember about colons is because they look like two full stops, they can only be used at the end of something called an independent clause. But an independent clause is just a sentence that works by itself. Okay, so colons can be used, there's two ways colons can be used that we're going to look at today. The first one is to expand a sentence. So the colon is used to introduce an idea that is then explained in the bit that comes after the colon. So there was only one thing the wolf wanted to do now, so that's the idea, and then the extra information about what that idea is going to come after the colon. So it says, eat that juicy Little Red Riding Hood. So you can see that this is the idea, and this explains what he's actually going to do. This is different from the semicolon because this would not work as an independent sentence. You couldn't just have the sentence, eat that juicy Little Red Riding Hood by itself. You wouldn't know what it meant, it wouldn't make sense. The flaw in the wolf's plan was clear to see. He looked nothing like Grandma. So you can see in this one, we're talking about the flaw in the wolf's plan, and then after the colon, we've got what the flaw was. So he looks nothing like grandma. Okay, so it's things are linked closely together, giving more explanation and continuing the idea. Okay, so the other way we're going to look at colons is to introduce a list. Now we're probably a bit more familiar with this one, we have done this before. If we're thinking about when we did our instructions and we were doing our list of materials that we needed, we would use a colon to introduce those. So here's an example. There were a few reasons that the wolf did not make a convincing grandma. Okay, so the colon is there, and then you're going to give the reasons after the colon. His eyes, his ears, his gruff voice, and his sharp, pointy teeth. And you can see that in our list, we've used a comma between each item in the list to separate out those ideas. And again, that's something we've done before. Little Red Riding Hood carried a selection of provisions for grandma, and then we've got our colon, and then our list of what the provisions were. Provisions just means items or things that grandma needed. A loaf of bread, some apples, and a freshly wrapped pat of butter. So we've looked at 3 different ways to use a type of colon. So the first was our semicolon, and we talked about how you would use that to join 2 sentences that work by themselves, but they work better together because they're about the same thing. And then we looked at 2 ways of using colons. The first was to expand on an idea and give more information, and the second was the one we're quite familiar with, which is to add items into a list. So let's do this quick little quiz and see what we can remember. Okay, so question 1. A or B, which is punctuated correctly. I love the sound of the birds singing, semicolon, however, I hate being woken up by them. Or B, I love the sound of the birds singing, normal colon, however, I hate being woken up by them. Okay, so let's have a look and see which one you think it is. Pause the video, have a think, have a look at them. And then when you're ready, play the video again and I'll show you the answer. Okay, so in this case, the correct use would be the semicolon, because these 2 sentences work fine by themselves. I love the sound of the birds singing, however, I hate being woken up by them. Okay, so we can see that A is the correct answer. Okay, question 2. Which of these is punctuated correctly? The woods here are beautiful, semicolon, peaceful, quiet and lush. The woods here are beautiful, colon, peaceful, quiet and lush. So again, I want you to have a look at those, have a think, pause the video, and when you're ready you can play and I'll talk through the answer. Okay, so in this, we have a list after the colon. So the woods here are beautiful, peaceful, quiet and lush. So thinking back to our list, what colon do we need before a list? And it is a normal, just a regular colon, not a semicolon. So it would be answer B. And question 3, which is punctuated correctly? So mother's words came to me, semicolon, take care in the woods. And then we've got mother's words came to me, colon, take care in the woods. So which one would it be if we're introducing this speech? Okay, so we know that we're adding more information and we're introducing the speech. So in this case, the correct answer would be to use the colon. Okay, so question 4. We've got Little Red Riding Hood took the map with her, and then we've got our semicolon. It was not very helpful. And then we've got Little Red Riding Hood took the map with her, colon. It was not very helpful. So have a think. Which do you think would be appropriate for this sentence? Okay, so in this instance, we've got 2 sentences that would make sense by themselves, but they're linked together. So Little Red Riding Hood took the map with her. It was very helpful. So in this case, it would be the semicolon, because they make sense by themselves, but they're better joined up together. Okay, so that is us done looking at our colons and semicolons. So you're going to get on with your tasks now.